family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. Find me on the old TikTok as well under the exact same handle, pro, 2 underscores, ANT. The show, of course, is sponsored by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, One Pie Pizza. Check the logo up in the top right-hand corner. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. In tonight's episode, second round of the playoffs for the Buffalo Bills as they advance past the Miami Dolphins in the super wild card round. I hate saying that phrase, but I'm gonna because I hate myself. They advance past the Miami Dolphins to the divisional round where they will take on the team that it seems like they have been fated to take on in these playoffs, the Cincinnati Bengals. And in tonight's episode, on the back end of this episode, we're going to dive into some Buffalo Bills game tape from that victory against the Miami Dolphins. We're going to look at several standout players and their role in that game against Miami and how it projects to this game upcoming against the Cincinnati Bengals. Then we're also going to take a look at some schematic pieces and some usage pieces in a good way, but how that kind of potentially lines up again with the Cincinnati Bengals in this divisional round. But in the forefront of this episode, got a little bit of a different twist. Normally here on the show, when we're in season, I like to have a guest on from the opposing team to really dive into the team. But with the Ravens just playing the Cincinnati Bengals, I took the advantage of that to bring on legitimately one of my favorite people I've ever had on the show and one of my favorite people on Twitter, and go into this theme a little bit of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So without further ado, I bring on to the show Mr. Spencer Schultz. You cover the Ravens. You're a Ravens guy. My heart goes out to you like we were talking before the show. Thank you very much for being here and potentially, opening up some old wounds as we talk about this annoying Bengals team and how to attack them, how to beat them, how to take them apart and dismantle them. But sincerely, welcome back to the show and thank you for being here.
Excited to be here. Excited to spend some time with you, and excited to talk to the good old Bills Mafia, one of my favorite fan bases. I think many players would probably say the same as well. You guys have a really nice community up there. So anytime I get to dive into the tape, the things you guys do at Cover One is outstanding. Big fan. Bills fans are lucky to have you guys, such dedicated analysts and people that love the game so much. So fired up to be here. Definitely opening up some old wounds, but this season for the Ravens was kind of an old wound. So I think many people are a little bit happy to maybe close this chapter. And for as close as the Ravens came, like I said before we hopped on, Ravens didn't belong in the divisional round. So it was a very valiant effort from them in many ways. But I think the more talented team did prevail, maybe even if they might not have fully deserved it.
That's fair. That's a very fair way to put it. I love what Jeff is already saying in the comments, saying that he pre-liked this episode. I love that. If you're just joining us now, please and thank you. Drop a like. The likes are the lifeblood of these streams. So please and thank you. Drop a like on this video. If you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, that's fine. I suggest you look inward and figure out what's wrong with you as like a person, just mentally, emotionally, all that kind of stuff. But drop a like on this video. It goes a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Spence, Let's look at this from a high-level perspective to start off. Coming into this game, especially you being so familiar with, well, honestly, with the Bills too, with, facing them earlier in the season and then facing the Cincinnati Bengals 3 times this year, including twice these past 2 weeks. When you sit and look at this game, whether it's schematically, whether it's on paper, whatever it is that causes you to have a gut feeling or an initial reaction, where does your head sit for, or maybe your heart potentially, for what this matchup will look like? Who do you think has the matchup advantage? Do you think these two teams are balanced? Where's your head at when it comes to Bills-Bengals?
My first two, I'd say 30,000-foot overview initial thoughts are that the Bengals offensive line is in shambles. They are limited. It reminds me somewhat of, and Joe Burrow always gets the Tom Brady comparison. I think there are many stylistic comparisons you can draw to Tom Brady from Joe Burrow's game. But we watch a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that is down bad in their offensive line. They do get Ryan Jensen back, for this one particular game, but it limited what the Buccaneers could do. And I think that the Bengals are a very vanilla spread team in many ways. I think they do a good job of making sure their big dogs get the football, but I don't know that they're a super complex offense. And on the defensive side of the football, I think that what Leslie Frazier has built is not dissimilar from where the Ravens have tried to philosophically as well as personnel-wise aim their defense into a really strong nickel team that feels like they can mix up coverages really well, play in and out of too high structure with the overarching philosophy, hey, we can put a lid on this thing and make you go down the field. So those are kind of my two overarching themes of this game on paper ahead of this matchup.
Let's start with one of those pieces. As you know, we have our loose structure and our outline of where we're going to go, but then we also kind of just let the conversation take us. You mentioned the offensive line, and that's a piece I do want to start with. So the Cincinnati Bengals, as it's been reported, their offensive line comes into this game heavily banged up. Jonah Williams dislocates his kneecap in the wild card round against the Ravens. It's his second. It's the other knee this time, but it's his second kneecap dislocation of the year. Like, just awful luck. How do you dislocate both kneecaps in a season? Like, good Lord. That's on top of La'el Collins going down several weeks ago. Alex Kappa is now out. So it looks like they will be down. We think, again, you can never guarantee anything unless there's some, magic healing or some braces, or I always think of the Ray Lewis, like deer antler spray or whatever that magically powered him in that Super Bowl run. But it looks like the Bengals will be down 3 offensive linemen. It's a similar situation for the Bills going into this past week against the Miami Dolphins, where Teron Armstead played, but he was banged up. They had players out on the rest of the offensive line. They're calling up practice squad guys. They're taking Hunt from right guard and moving him to right tackle. And you go into that game, and Roy says it right here in the comments already, playing a banged up O-line of Miami didn't seem to help out our front four, so I don't think it matters much this week either. When the Bills had a tremendous defensive line performance against the run. They completely owned the line of scrimmage, push, penetration, gap control, and it was across the line. It was literally everybody had a strong run defense rep, if not a multitude of run defense reps. But when it came to pass rush, it seemed like there was some bite that was missing. The majority of the pressure that the Bills generated in this game either came from legitimate blitzes, 5 or 6 man blitzes, but a lot of simulated pressures, a lot of creepers. You would have thought going into, or hoped at least, if you're the Bills or Bills Mafia, going into that game against the Dolphins, that you would have had more juice up front because of how, bereft of starters they were on that offensive line. And I'm watching the Ravens tape against the Cincinnati Bengals, and even when Jonah Williams was in there, this Bengals O-line was struggling. Adafe Owe had a monster game, 4 pressures, 2 sacks, 2 hurries. It seemed like, and he was representative of, it seemed like everybody on that defensive line. Houston had a bunch of good reps. JPP had some wins. We saw Tyus Bowser looking fantastic. You saw Calais Campbell. Like, they were getting in with simulateds, with creepers, with 3-man game, with 4-man games, and just really eating up this Bengals offensive line. And it's a matchup advantage I think should favor the Buffalo Bills. And I think it's so important given what this Bengals offense is. But I'm worried on like the faith piece of whether or not the Bills can attack that Bengals grouping and really win that matchup piece. But when you go back to what the Ravens did, they won on the defensive line consistently, especially when the Bengals were in pass protection. And it really helped them put a really good game plan and performance together against Joe Burrow.
Yeah, you said that really well, Ant. And a big thing with Joe Burrow, I think that he kind of reminds me of Dak Prescott. I think they have a similar ability to reset through their hips and fire the football. I think that they can torque through their throwing side really well when they're on the move. And what I've seen, the Ravens facing Joe Burrow 3 times this season, obviously last year as well. If your rush isn't staggered, if you are losing contain, he is comfortable. He is comfortable to move. He loves to move in the pocket. It is where he's most comfortable, moving a little bit and, again, torquing through. He doesn't throw those 99-mile-an-hour 4 seams. He's able to really just use his hips and his arm as a lever and sprinkle the ball really accurately. He can get a little bit of drive on it, but not known for really being that flamethrower. So I think a huge key is to internally disrupt, whether that is through games. We saw the Ravens do some interesting things right ahead of the snap. We watched, for instance, there's a play where Calais Campbell is going to hop over from the right A gap to the left A gap, which is going to change the way that the slide goes and what they see post snap as soon as that's happening. Then they bring in a huge wrap from Tyus Bowser going all the way, almost in a 9-tech, all the way through the A gap to go in and make sure that Joe Burrow can't really step up comfortably. I think that because he doesn't generate a ton of velocity, you can't let him step up to maximize the velocity he has. The Ravens really like to try and force him to throw over the middle of the field things they did in coverage a little bit. They like to vision to the quarterback. They like to play outside leverage. They really want to funnel everything over the middle because the Bengals are capable of being so explosive. And we've watched the Bengals over the season become more comfortable over the middle of the field, putting Jamar Chase in the slot and asking him to run in-breaking routes, asking T. Higgins to run over the middle of the football field. Hayden Hurst has a really big role in this offense as well. So I think that preventing Joe Burrow from stepping up is just as, if not more important than necessarily hitting him. I think when you allow him to maneuver, step, and throw, that's where he's comfortable. Joe Burrow, knowing that he had, and I guess Zach Taylor as well, knowing that they were going to be down a couple guys in the offensive line, and Jonah Williams really maximizes that. We see, according to Next Gen Stats, Joe Burrow got the ball out in 2.38 seconds with an intended average air yardage of 6.2. So that was really minimal. So what is that telling us? The Bengals know that they're shorthanded. They're going to get the ball out quickly. They're going to throw the ball underneath. We didn't see a ton of deep shots. We didn't really see that as an element of their game that they're trying to do. So they do feel super limited. And as they're going to throw in Jackson Carman, it sounds like, at left tackle, which they did. Big mauling guy. Boy can move. He kind of reminds you a little bit of a Cody Ford for Bills fans in that same kind of frame. And he can get into your pads. He can combo block a little bit. So I would expect to see the run game try and take some pressure off of that as well. Joe Mixon is a pretty good blocking back that can help in the A-gap. We've seen the Bengals use sniffers a lot and use some inside against when they think they're going to get some pressure. They'll have someone go take the A-gap out and make sure there's not going to be someone unblocked. So Bengals know that they're shorthanded. They are very vulnerable to games right now. And straight up, if you have a pass rush that understands I can't lose contain on both sides and allow Joe Burrow to elongate a play and find that broken play, then you're going to have a good day against him and generating some pressure.
You mentioned a lot of things that I want to follow up on, and I expected you to mention a lot of really good things because you're a smart guy, and I like it. The first piece is the Bengals' ability to run out of shotgun, which they weren't too successful with against the Ravens, but that worries me just with how their season has gone. So as the season progressed, they have moved away from have moved to running like the heavy majority of their offense out of shotgun, like whether they're passing, whether they're running, everything. And I didn't want to use too many of their numbers after the canceled Bills game because it's the game against the Ravens backups in week 18. It's kind of wonky and weird, but weeks 1 through 5, the Bengals had a 69% shotgun rate, which was 13th in the league. From week 6 and on, so going through to week 16, they had a shotgun rate of 80%, which was so an 11 percentage point increase in their shotgun usage rate. And again, they're running everything out of it. They're running the ball and they're passing the ball, but the diversity of their run game out of shotgun is what really has impressed me the more tape I watched them. They'll get to a variety of runs out of shotgun. It could be inside zone, outside zone, pin and pull, crack toss, draw, duo. They'll run some wham. They'll run some trap. They have a diverse run game out of that shotgun package. And it's really helped them to stay versatile and less predictable in terms of, having that under center base run game where it was like, okay, here comes the run. I found it interesting with how the Ravens defended and flipped the switch a little bit on some of the things that they have done traditionally over the year versus what they did in this game against the Bengals. So the Ravens in 2022, a light box rate of 55%. Against the Bengals, they had a light box rate of 80%. In 2022, a too high shell rate of 56%. Versus the Bengals, a too high shell rate of 80% in the wild card. Blitz rate in the regular season in 2022, 21% versus the Bengals in the wild card round, 10%. 3-man rush rate in the regular season, 8% against the Bengals in the wild card, 18%. You saw more of a concentrated focus game plan to, it alludes to several of the pieces you already mentioned, limit the explosives for everything that you can get from Higgins and Chase, and even mix in Hayden Hurst to a degree. You saw a couple, intermediate successful plays, but a lot of this game for the Bengals was spent, hitches, running some stick, little snag route here or there. You have the Hayden Hurst touchdown that was like one of the most explosive plays of the game for them. Everything they were living underneath a shell. And it wasn't even like the Ravens were necessarily playing, too high coverages on the back end too. They actually were pretty split in terms of post-snap coverages, single high and two high. Single high coverages, 41%, 16 snaps. Two high coverages, 46%, but only 2 snaps more. Even when they were in cover 3, Peters and Humphrey were off. They were keeping everything in front of them. And it led to more of an inefficient day for Joe Burrow, especially when you pair it with the Ravens offense that is so run scheme focused and you limit the possessions. Do you think is that, I don't know if there is a blueprint to stop a really good offense, especially one like the Bengals, but do you think more of that literally just keep everything in front of you, make you nickel and dime us, dime a dozen, nickel and dime it up and down the field, death by 1,000 cuts? Do you think that's the way to go against this offense, especially seeing the success that the Ravens had with that to a degree?
Most certainly, especially it feels like, and this is more of maybe a fan take or a Madden take, but once you see Joe Burrow start to develop a strong rhythm, especially with the Jamar Chase, suddenly they're airing the ball out 25, 30, 35 yards downfield at will. They really can find a rhythm and get after you. And I think what the Ravens did and have done throughout the season is really invite the Bengals to feel like they can run some longer developing route concepts and then finally bring pressure. Bait the Bengals into thinking you're going to get some guys dropping off the line of scrimmage. You're going to get a one-on-one on the outside, and then that's when you bring late pressure. And the Ravens really, it felt like, tried to emphasize almost bluffing stupid is a way to put it, of, Kyle Hamilton looks like he's going to come, and he's chomping at the bit, and maybe you get a little pre-snap cadence going to try and draw him out, and then he's going to drop back off and take away inside leverage. You think you're going to have a hot read. It's not there. No one else is hot, and Joe Burrow has to hold the football. So I think the post-snap part, you can't simply sit back into a certain coverage and not change looks post-snap. If you allow him to see pre-snap and post-snap the same thing, that's where that rhythm starts to come out and they start to figure it out. And I do think the Bengals really utilize the width of the field. That's probably the primary philosophy or primary objective of the Bengals, is to make sure that zones are big, that a defender is going to have to cover a lot of space. So trying to bait them into throwing different areas is how you can make them wrong, especially with those pre-snap looks. So I think that an interesting thing that the Ravens did as well, and that I hadn't really seen a ton of from NFL teams in general, they'll start bailing their corners. Their corners will be visioning. Their corners will take some kind of inside eyes, outside leverage. Then they would buzz underneath with their slot defenders. They would have those guys turn their backs, go run under where a hitch could be thrown. And then the Bengals would start trying to say, okay, let's hit some seam balls. Let's push the ball up the seam. But those corners in that kind of cover 3, cover 1 match vision would be able to jump those inside routes. And again, to tie back, Joe Burrow can't really zip a ball up the seam. He has to throw a money ball, and you have corners that are going to be able to break on the football. So I think that led to the Bengals feeling like they had to get the ball out quickly and check down a ton. And hey, guys like Hayden Hurst, guys like Jamar Chase, they're going to make plays over the middle of the field. When you give them the middle of the field a little bit and bait them there, they will still beat you. I think that for the Bengals to have a good day, they are going to need Jamar Chase to line up inside quite a good bit again, and it's a little tougher. I think that the Ravens linebackers did a nice job, but Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds are longer. They have a lot more margin for error because of their frames and because of their athleticism than I think the Ravens linebackers had. They can close those throwing windows simply with their length a little bit. Both very sharp mental guys, but for the Bengals to win this one, they're going to need Jamar Chase to go inside, and I think the thing that made him a little bit of a weird evaluation is that he is maybe the most efficient mover on simple routes. There is no wasted motion. He is able to really bite a route off on a sharp angle, and especially over the middle of the football field. So I think that's going to have to be the game for the Bengals. Move him around a little bit, get him to be a number 2 and a number 3, and then hope that he's able to set up and continue winning with that leverage. But you can still take that away. If you know that's where they want to go, suddenly you have the linebackers cheating in that direction, turning their entire hips and body, and you've got safeties behind it. So I think that the Bengals are up against a little bit of a tall task. They've got playmakers, but they find themselves in a worse situation that they were in last year in terms of their offensive line. And looking to their run game, I'm not sure. I asked a good friend of mine, Mike Santagato, who covers the Bengals from Bengals Wire. He's a great mind of football. So definitely someone you would like a lot, Ant. But the Bengals really, I mean, they brought in Lyle Collins. They wanted to run the ball to the right side. When you go look at simply by gap or by direction, you see that the Bengals, the breakdown is that to the left end, they've got 18 attempts, 17 to left tackle, 26 to left guard, 33 to the left middle. When you go to the right side, it is 47, 28, 39, and 37. They were a right side dominant team. And you can kind of tell when they put their tight end to the right, even if, regardless of where the back is, like you said, Ant, they'll run trap, they'll run counter, they'll have same back, same tight end side. They'll go to YY a little bit, usually always on the right side. they have easy tells in their run game, and I'm not sure what they're going to do to combat that. I feel like at this point, with their offensive line in the condition that it's in, it's going to be a little bit tough for them. But they did not generate a run of 15 yards with Joe Mixon the entire season to the left side. So they are limited in that sense. They are a very limited offense with supreme talent. And it feels like, again, with the Leslie Frazier defense that does feel relatively healthy at this point in time, save for a couple, big name players, Von Miller. Micah Hyde's not playing in this one, correct? I think you might be muted, my friend.
Rookie. I don't know how I even muted myself. Thank you for picking it up. I also saw the notification come up. I'm so mad at myself. Yeah, but I thought he was going to play in the divisional round. I had it kind of earmarked. McDermott came out last week and said that he will not. It looks like the AFC Championship game plus with who, some guys that they signed off, practice squads and things, when it lines up with when they can release them and put Hyde on the roster, like that lines up AFC Championship game wise. But yeah, it doesn't look like Hyde's playing this week. Disappointing.
Well, that definitely, definitely makes it a little bit tough for what the Bills want to do. And again, you don't have that, maybe supreme pass rusher. Greg Rousseau is a force, and I actually did put a $35 bet on him to have a sack last week. I thought that would be nice. I did. Yeah. I hit that on the Barstool Sportsbook. Didn't end up getting it, but hey, I was there.
No.
So
you hit your last one though. The last time you were on the show, you told everybody to book J.K. Dobbins as an anytime touchdown scorer against the Bills, and it happened immediately. And I literally was like, he was right. And then I was like, oh, the Ravens are up. Damn it! Like, well done. You nailed it. it.
I think Mr. Russo gets one in this game again against an even more tough offensive line, and I think Leslie Frazier has done such a good job over the last couple playoff runs. Obviously, the Chiefs gave them a tough matchup, but. And even last week, some weird instances occurred, I guess we shall say. The Dolphins are a frustrating team to have to defend, but usually is able to match up pretty well in the playoffs and figure out some small caveats to go win. So I'm really looking to those middle linebackers, Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. They need to have a day of, I don't know. I guess the easiest way to put it, like you want to see them go have a 75 PFF day. I don't know how else to put it. You want to see them play a game where there's not a lot of negatively graded plays. They don't need to be high impact guys or high impact players, but go sit in those hooks, go make life difficult, allow your defense to rally to the football. Don't let the Bengals go catch the ball over the middle of the field and get going. So I would be looking in this one from the Bengals, man. I'm really going to try and bait Jamar Chase over the middle of the field and hopefully able to go win with T. Higgins on the outside, Tyler Boyd to move a chain mover, but it just feels limited, man. Play action's not going to be a super huge threat. I don't think that they feel super confident trying to run the football really anywhere right now. And again, just the fact that there's so little explosiveness. I think the only place they found success generating a 30-plus yard rush was to the right end there, where they were able to have Hayden Hurst and Lyle Collins. And other than that, it's kind of, running the ball for the sake of running the football. So a weird matchup, I think, a little bit of some missing elements, but I think the Bills definitely have an advantage. I know the Bengals, the rumors in their locker room are that they're very confident because they went down and scored against the Bills in the game that ended up getting canceled. But Bengals have been very sharp overall. I think Zach Taylor does a really nice job scripted. Then from there, it's kind of, hey, Joe Burrow, can you go figure it out and find yourself into a rhythm a little bit more so they don't have a ton of pixie dust typically to sprinkle in the second and third quarter.
You mentioned the piece of I saw so many comments of like, well, especially when it came to what was going to happen in the playoffs with the seeding and everything and how it was going to shake out. And I saw so many comments from Bengals fans or Bengals writers or analysts, whoever, just all of the Bengals were up 7-3 and they were driving again. The Bengals were probably going to win that game. And I found that just to be so, I don't care who's up. Like the Bills were up 17-3. Ask the Chargers what it's like to be up early on a team and see what happens. But especially a team like the Bills defense is so boxer-like, where the first couple of rounds, you're just feeling out like, okay, he's going to the jab. Okay, we scouted the haymaker. There it is, blah, blah, blah. And when you look at it from a DVOA perspective, so this is on the year, first quarter defense DVOA. Actually, I should put it in perspective. So the Bills finished 4th in defensive DVOA for the entire year, which is very good. Their first quarter DVOA as a defense is 27th, but their second quarter DVOA is 2nd. Their third quarter DVOA is 7th, fourth quarter in OT is 3rd, and late and close, it is also 3rd. This is a defense that gets stronger as the game goes on. And again, it makes sense. They come out, they want to see what you're going to run in your first 15 scripted and want to see what you're aiming for this game and what you're trying to do. They diagnose it, they adjust, they get on the Microsoft tablets and they start going after it. And that adjustment piece, I think, will be so interesting because the Bengals did come out hot in that game. Even the first, well, I shouldn't say the first touchdown because it was the only touchdown in that game. I saw so many people saying like, oh, Tyler Boyd just like cooked Tre'Davious White. And it wasn't necessarily that. They ran a 2-man route from that side and the inside receiver pulled Damar Hamlin. They were in quarters. And so Trey White got beat on the inside. He had outside leverage. It was a good concept. They pulled a defender and put Tyler Boyd into that vacated space. It was good design, worked out against the coverage. Boom. But there was so much left to that game. And the matchup tendencies and pieces for it, one of them that was in my head going back into the round one of this meeting was that run game piece. And you spoke about it a little bit and how they've struggled with it. I'm always for me, everything, and I don't think this is unique to me, but everything they're able to do in coverage starts with how you're able to fit the run. And especially for the Buffalo Bills, even more so, because we know they want to be in 2 high shells. We know they want to be able to disguise coverage. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, name of the show. We know they want to fit the run with 6-man boxes. At most, they want to be like a 7-man box team. The only way they're bringing a safety down with regularity is if the matchup really dictates it. And it's like, okay, are you a run first team? And we're really trying to shut down the run. And so we feel like we need to commit a safety to the box pre-snap in order to do that. We don't even want to take the risk of spinning one down. And if they can't fit it, that obviously limits what you can do on the back end. This isn't like rocket science. If you have to commit more players to the box, that's less numbers in coverage. So much of this game for me starts with the defensive front piece and how they're able to fit the run with the defensive line and linebackers, so that box. But then, what kind of pressure can they get? Do they have the numbers advantage in coverage, which is where they want to live? In an ideal world for the Buffalo Bills, they are dropping 7 into coverage consistently. That's who they want to be. An interesting aspect that I noticed, in terms of dropping numbers into coverage, so the Bills aren't a crazy, drop 3 coverage kind of team. They are, for the majority of this year, a rush 4 type of team. And when you look at some of the numbers for Joe Burrow, his numbers against 3-man rushes are very interesting. So on the year for the Buffalo Bills, they have only used 3-man rushes to a 4% usage rate. They've had 23 snaps of 3-man rushes, which was 23rd in the entire NFL. Joe Burrow this year against 3-man rushes, of the 45 quarterbacks that have at least 10 attempts against 3-man rushes, so 45 QBs, Burrow is 44th in EPA. He's 39th in rating. He has the 7th highest interception percentage. He has he's 25th in positive play percentage. He's tied for the most interceptions with 3rd. He's 31st in on-target percentage, and he's 32nd in yards per attempt. And when I look at, again, tying it into, I wanted to have you on and I wanted to talk about, tying in with this Ravens piece. 1, because you have familiarity, but 2, the Ravens played this Bengals offense well last week. Granted, they limited possessions because of what the offense did, but you saw, like I mentioned earlier, the Ravens on the year, 8% 3-man rush rate. In this game against the Bengals, they had an 18% 3-man rush rate. They increased that piece and you saw it work. I would say 5 or 6 out of their 7 3-man rush snaps, they either generated pressure and got a sack or forced an incompletion. You had, one of them, Owe, just completely owned Jonah Williams and drove him right back into Joe Burrow. But that 3-man rush piece and contributing another member to your coverage piece, granted, it's tied to can you win up front. The Ravens had the luxury of running, only rushing 3. And again, Houston was winning or Owe was winning. It's like, oh, sweet. Well, if you can only rush 3 and somebody's winning within like a second and a half, surprise, like that's an advantage. But they gamed it up well too. They would show 4 or they'd show 5 down and everybody would step and engage and then drop out and they're only rushing 3. And Burrow, more often than not, again, it speaks to the yards per attempt that I mentioned at 5.6. He was really looking short underneath, either looking to the flats or the low hook curls. And a lot of times he was throwing incomplete passes because the Ravens were squeezing those windows, flooding the short and intermediate. He had nowhere to go. And to your point about Roquan Smith and the Ravens linebackers versus the Bills, one of the light bulbs that ticked in my brain was Milano and Edmonds are bigger and longer than Queen and Roquan. I feel like that strategy, again, all the advanced metrics I just read, Burrow struggling against 3-man, rushes. And even if they're running 4-man rushes, the length and how you can clog everything underneath and in the intermediate, even more so with what the Bills have. I feel like that Ravens game plan lends itself even more so to the Bills because of the natural ability and size and frame that their players have inside.
Definitely, very much so. And you hit the nail on the head. I think a key element to that was showing a lot of games, showing a lot of different pressure looks. And while it might have been more of simulated rushes, I think the Ravens only blitzed Joe Burrow 5 times total. Once they had started to get some pressure, generate some pressure, show some gains, then once they feel like, okay, Joe Burrow is going to have to get the ball out quickly, then you drop the 8. It was kind of leading with the hook and then going for the jab a little bit more so. It was trying to throw some power punches and then backing off and playing that little bit more conservative game. You get Joe Burrow a little bit antsy. When he was blitzed, he ended up holding the ball a little bit longer. I think 2.88 seconds against the blitz, 3.55 against pressure. So
which is crazy for him, considering, like you mentioned earlier, like his game is just hike, snap it, it's out. Like, so the fact that he's holding it anything over like 2.5 is wild.
Definitely. So he does. I think he doesn't get it. It's the classic, the deceptively athletic white boy. We always hear about that one, but he's laterally quick. And again, he can re-square himself. He feels comfortable to start moving and re-square downfield. So I think that's absolutely prescient. If I'm the Bills, I would really start mugging Edmonds and Milano a little bit, start trying to dictate some of the work up front for the Bengals offensive line, force a slide one way so that, hey, I might be able to actually rush 3 or 4, but I know I'm going to get a 2-on-2 on one side, be able to use a guy like AJ Epinesa, a guy like Boogie Basham, a guy like Ed Oliver, these bigger, stronger players to kind of rush the B gap through the A gap a little bit and try and generate that, again, internal pressure. So I think this game for the Bills defense is very much so going to come down to, hey, can we keep our corners conservative? Can we help them out a little bit, prevent those raindrops over top? I think that Burrow only attempted 1 pass over 20 yards. Again, vision is very important to that. Making those corners feel like they have help underneath. They don't really have a reason to jump on hitches. They don't have a reason to jump in that sense. So overall, this Bengals offense, I think, is going to be a little bit up against the wall. And especially considering, hey, you're playing a damn good run defense, a run defense that has consistently been among the league's best in terms of success rate and things of that nature, and being able to do so from some lighter positions. So the Bengals don't have ancillary tight ends or fullbacks that they can go heavy personnel with. They don't care to go heavy. Again, they will bring in, their backup tight end and go YY a little bit. But again, it just kind of feels like, hey, I've got to change up. I'm going to throw it a couple times just for the sake of it. So I think this game strongly favors the Bills defense as long as they can keep things in front of them.
Another one last piece, to hit on this side of the ball before we flip things a bit. Again, because the Ravens had a successful day. They limited Joe Burrow to a 0.04 EPA in this wildcard round, which was 7th of all the quarterbacks in the wildcard round. And it was only 7th because all the quarterbacks behind him were like super, super negative, like Tom Brady, who was like negative 3.5. Let's talk about some of those coverage pieces that the Ravens used, or what you think slows down this Bengals offense. I've heard people throw out a lot of, potential more cloud coverages as a way to obviously like cloud Higgins and or Chase, but then obviously if Chase goes inside, the games and everything, you do that from that perspective. Do you look for more cloud coverages? Are you mixing everything up? Are you throwing single high? Are you throwing 2 high? Like, I know where my head lies, but I want to get your thought as somebody, again, who's seen this team 3 times this year. What are you looking to play on the back end in order to really limit them?
I think it's just more so mixing. It's not necessarily cloud or a sky or a palms or whatever it is. Again, I'm just going to come back to mixing it up. You can't sit back. One of the things that I find very interesting, the Ravens got and signed Marcus Williams, very highly regarded safety. That's kind of considered, hey, he's in Dennis Allen's defense. He's sitting on the roof. He's playing depth. He's taking away the deep middle and trying to go range and help out inside leverage of corners. What the Ravens have done a ton is turn him into a rat or turn him into a man coverage player in a post-snap rotation. Suddenly, Jamar Chase is lined up inside. The Ravens feel like, okay, we have a very nimble, longer, he's kind of like a 6'1" lanky dude who can all of a sudden come screaming down at the snap And he's playing man coverage that you didn't see happening from a too high structure. Suddenly the safety is coming down, playing man coverage, and is going to be physical at the stem. Was able to break up a couple passes in their last 2 matchups doing so. So definitely, the Bengals have found themselves getting more comfortable against those middle of the field open coverages. But I'm just going to tie back. Joe Burrow is a smart dude. He has to be. Again, not the most arm talented guy in the entire world. He's definitely no Josh Allen in that sense. So he needs to beat you mentally, and doing everything you can to make him have to hold the ball a tick longer, not being able to get to the top of his drop and get the ball out, or forcing him to go up into he's got Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, Hayden Hurst. These guys, I think they're nice players. I think they're very consistent. I think they have a balanced skill set, but that's not getting the ball to someone who's going to break you for 45 yards. None of those guys are going to flip the field on you by taking a check down. They'll generate first downs. They'll generate missed tackles, things of that nature. So I think you have to feel like, if you're the Bengals, that you're going to try and use that safety valve. I anticipate some empty from them in this one to try and limit what you can disguise up front. And maybe a little bit of tempo to help as well. Tempo is always going to minimize the defense's ability to feel comfortable disguising things. So in those situations, protecting your corners is the second piece. Making sure that those guys can play depth, can feel comfortable visioning, don't feel like that they're going to let up an explosive play if they let a slant go underneath, or if they let, Jamar Chase go sit down against a hitch, feeling comfortable to go close out and all of those kinds of things. So protecting your cornerbacks and preventing Burrow from feeling confident in a pre versus post snap look. And I know that's not I think that Leslie Frazier, for some reason, there's a narrative that he doesn't really mix things up post snap. I think that's a narrative that we've nixed for quite some time, but still will kind of get regurgitated. So again, I feel super confident in his ability when you've got guys like Teron Johnson, you got guys like Poyer, you've got guys like the middle linebackers that they feel comfortable in a lot of matchups with, that can go do some different things. And when the Bengals aren't in that empty tempo, go stick those guys at the line of scrimmage and make that offensive line a little bit confused. Use those super athletic young guys, Basham, Russo, Ed Oliver, all those guys on some games, some wraps, some twists, some stunts, and I think you'll find great success.
It's funny. I led that question to purposely not give my answer away, and your answer is super tied to my answer. And again, this is my go-to thing for a majority of quarterbacks in the NFL today, but changing that pre to post snap picture. But against somebody like Burrow, I think it's so much more important, especially because the offensive line isn't ideal up front. Anything that you can do to add an extra beat to his drop back, even if it's a 1/10 of a second, a 1/4 of a second, because with how they've struggled up front, there's a chance that if you can get him to hold that ball an extra 1/4 of a second, you might get a pressure out of it, especially with somebody like Greg Rousseau's length. An extra 1/4 of a second means the hand goes from here to his hand and his arm are completely in your face. And it's
or just simply being able to stick your hands up and clog a passing lane.
Exactly. Getting Burrow to hold on to the ball. And I don't think him holding it is necessarily going to be due to, just straight regular, hey, we're showing cover 2 and then we run cover 2. I think it's got to be that mixture. It's got to be that change. It's got to be the disguising coverage, like all jokes aside and no pun intended. And I love that you mentioned the Frazier piece, because I think because the Bills run like a more
their personnel is very consistent. So people think that they don't do a lot out of it, which doesn't make sense.
And everyone's always like, oh, they're just always in nickel. And so they always just in there. Oh, yeah. Or people will be like, yeah, they just run quarters a lot, or they're just like cover 4. They run everything. They throw like every 2 high coverage you can run, they run. Every single high coverage you can run, they run. And they'll show one and drop into another. They'll spin safeties down. They'll show a single high look, and it'll end up being 2 high coverage. It'll be cover 2. And Taron Johnson, the slot corner, is one of the deep half safeties dropping back. They will game you up. And I think that's so important in this game. Anything you can do to add an extra beat to Joe Burrow and make him hold on to that ball. Again, if you can get him to read wrong and you get a turnover, or you can force incompletions or create negative plays, that's awesome, from a once he throws the ball perspective. But anything you can do to increase the odds of you winning up front, because I think the game is so tied to that, but the coverage piece can work with it. And with the success the Bills had against the Dolphins with their simulated pressures and their creepers, similar to, the Ravens had a couple really good sims and a couple really good creepers in this game. I'm thinking of the one where Kyle Hamilton ended up coming off the slot. I think it's the one where Justin Houston got around and got Burrow by the jersey and like yanked him back. And all the Bengals fans were like, oh, horse collar, but no, it doesn't count within the pocket. They showed 5 at the line, ended up only rushing 4. They dropped one of their defensive tackles and the far edge. I think the far edge was Owe. Hamilton came off the left slot, and it was just such a well-designed blitz. And Burrow, you saw it confuse Burrow. And then not only did it confuse Burrow, but the Ravens, they won instantaneously. And getting some sort of mix, either winning instantaneously or confusing him or both, I think is so important. Again, in general in today's NFL, but especially a cerebral quarterback who has to win with his mind and then has the weapons on the outside that afford him so many advantages. Flip side of the ball, this Bengals defense. The Ravens offense is a unicorn, so I think it's hard for teams to be like, yeah, we're going to do what the Ravens do. But the Bills do have some kind of aspect of the Ravens offense to their game because of the running prowess of Josh Allen. No, he is not the runner that Lamar Jackson is, or even,
I wouldn't say they're outside of the same ballpark. Josh Allen's a much different runner, but he is a very successful impact.
Oh, successful for sure. But I feel like Lamar is more electric and elusive, and Josh is more athletic plus power. But again, you can run your QB powers and your QB bash. Like you can do what the Ravens do. It just has to be tweaked a little differently. The Ravens had a lot of success with it. Part of the success they had was running at Trey Hendrickson every single time. And you saw several reps from Trey Hendrickson, who I'm also still upset at because I know he barrel rolled into Josh Allen's legs on purpose, but that's a conversation for another day. You saw him almost give up at times. He would see a pulling guard and he would just be like, oh, dude, and just kind of like take it and not even try to do anything. They ran at him consistently. And then they ran with those heavier packages, which also forced the Bengals to put a third linebacker on the field, which we know they want to live in a world where Mike Hilton is on the field. I say all that to say, what do you think of that game plan for the Buffalo Bills? Because in the back of my head, and I know it's been a thought for a lot of Bills Mafia, there hasn't been a lot of Josh Allen design runs this year. And the feeling is like Ken Dorsey's kind of just saving it for the in case of emergency, break glass, release this play. I think it'll come into play this week because of how good the Bills are at it, because of how dangerous Josh Allen is. You also have the read element with how successful James Cook has been, but also seeing how the Ravens, really own the Bengals with that piece, and it also allowed them to play keep away. Do you think that's something the Bills emulate, and would you suggest it given the success you saw the Ravens had?
I definitely think saving that for a second half, saving that for some key situations is a really good idea, running some of the bash, because the heart and soul to me of the Bengals defense is the monster in the middle. DJ Reader, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the NFL.
Big time.
If you try and run inside zone, you will get stuffed. You might be able to knock them back once. You might be able to get a couple, 8-yard gains, whatever. Bengals have an extremely disciplined defense. They do such a good job staying where they're supposed to. So you do have to kind of bully them on the perimeter. They have struggled severely against jet sweeps. They have struggled severely on some of the contain to the outside a little bit more so because they feel so confident about DJ Reader two-gapping in the middle. Zone stuff is not a good idea. You can get them on some outside zone. You can get them moving, generate a cutback lane. I could see a James Cook having a nice little cutback, being able to go be explosive in some space, things of that nature. But just not an easy defense to run the football on. And you call the Ravens offense a unicorn. It is. It is incredibly diverse. They have so many, again, ancillary blockers, the Josh Olivers, the Pat Ricards. Mark Andrews has turned into a hell of a blocker. They've got big boys that they can go try to. Isaiah Likely had a really nice year. All of those kinds of things. But if you try and go run between the B gaps and go hit them with some common zone concepts, you're not going to have a fun time. So I think quarterback sweep, sure, but I see the bash a little bit more successful, maybe using some jet motion bash a little bit. Maybe if an Isaiah McKenzie's coming back into this game, he's a player that I would really like to try and work the Bengals laterally side to side, expand their gaps a little bit, and see if you can make them just feel that presence to the perimeter to attack a little bit downhill. Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt are good linebackers. They do a nice job. They have just enough athleticism to always be able to go run plays down when they kind of get extended. So it's kind of a game of getting DJ Reader to start moving to hope that you can kind of get a little bit going between the B gaps and trying to really attack the perimeter. So bash, in my opinion, is the best run concept in football. I think that's why we see so many teams using it right now around college football, around the NFL, forcing defenses to feel that element, using all 11 guys. And Josh Allen being able to be a explosive playmaker in that sense is huge. Another way you can get the Bengals is kind of with using a back as a lead blocker or having kind of almost a draw element into the game, because the Bengals, it does feel like when you go into some straight drop back stuff, will kind of leave the A gap a little bit. They will really try to penetrate. So something the Ravens have commonly done is use a back instead of as, hey, go run a check down and I'll throw you the ball, especially with Lamar Jackson. It's, hey, go get blocking. I'm going to follow you. I have a lead blocker upfield. So there's kind of a check down draw element to it, is something the Ravens have had success on, not in this past game, but when Lamar Jackson's been under center. So I think that's another way, but it's a war of attrition. I think Jesse Bates does a nice job. Mike Hilton has always been a really good run defender as their slot cornerback. He's
one of the best in the league at the slot. He might even be the best slot corner in the league. He's fantastic.
Especially kind of in the underneath nickel role, not being really exposed downfield a ton. So as somewhat of a box nickel is a way to put it. Definitely very much so. So Sam Hubbard, hell of a defender. So I think you're spot on. You want to run at Trey Hendrickson a little more. He does have a bad wrist right now too, so he might not feel confident in gripping and being able to have that exchange of push pulls and exchanging power through there. So I think it's definitely a tough job running on a really disciplined defense. But if you get them working side to side, you can really open things up.
And that's that piece. I want to run at Trey Hendrickson, and if he's coming out and Joseph Asai is coming in, who I really like coming out of Texas, I'm still running at him too. I love your points about the Bengals, like interior. BJ Hill and DJ Reader are so underrated as like, especially in the pantheon of like interior defenders that have really risen up this game. Like Quinnen Williams took a huge jump, and Dexter Lawrence took a huge jump, and the Aaron Donalds of the world, and Vita Vea is a unicorn in and of himself, so he gets pressed. But Hill and Reader have been just really strong for this team on the interior, and they make it tough to run on them. And I think Sam Hubbard, you mentioned him, it's that same mold, like just a pain in the ass to go against. He's not the most athletic. He's not the biggest. He's not the strongest, but he's physical. He's mean. He grinds. Like, he's got a high motor. He's the prototypical, like, every single rep he gives you is 110%, and he makes it difficult on you to get him out of position, to seal him, to wash him down, to kick him out. He's giving you resistance and pushback every single step of the way.
They do a good job getting him on tight ends as well, and using his length and being able to overwhelm tight ends when you bring tight ends in line too.
Yes, take advantage of that matchup and his ability to own the tight end piece. I love Bash, and I love that you love it. I love that you're into it. The Bills scored a touchdown on it to James Cook this past weekend against the Miami Dolphins, and that's such an intriguing piece for this Bills offense, to have a back in the backfield who has juice. They have not had it these past several years. Even when Zach Moss was cooking or Devin Singletary is at his best, it's still not this like guy that if you're off a little bit, he's going to make you pay, and it's going to be a problem. And we saw that on the James Cook touchdown. Roberts hesitated just a little. All he did was take 2 steps up to honor Josh Allen. Allen gave it to Cook, and Cook had the speed to beat him to the corner, and he didn't have the ability to catch up. Taking advantage of the hesitation of, misleading defenders, or sometimes, Wilson and especially Jermaine Pratt, maybe they get a little too, fast flowing and they get a little too far upfield, or you get them going side to side and all of a sudden you hit them where you just made them leave, or they stayed home and you're out the other side. That type of misdirection piece in attacking, I feel like you see somewhere around, like, whether it's maybe not even including scrambles, I feel like you get close to double-digit carries for Josh Allen in this game. I think that's such a key to attacking this Bengals defense, is starting to really loosen them up, especially with what they want to do. And this is the next piece I'm going to ask you. Like, you've got Jesse Bates and you've got Von Bell, and their ability to kind of protect the corners on the outside. Then they kind of just are able to shell that up and protect everything. But if you can get them to commit and have to honor and respect that run because you're getting gashed, that's the one piece. With Lamar being out and then the injury to Bateman, and honestly even the injury to Duvernay, like, that's the piece the Ravens offense didn't have, that ability to threaten the vertical piece. I'd say that knowing that Eli Apple got beat on a double move to Demarcus Robinson for a touchdown, but the Bills have a very real passing attack with very real weapons on the outside. And if you can pair that with a real running game that honestly can mimic to a degree what the Ravens do, which for me is high praise. I think the Ravens running attack is the best in the league. I love it, especially when it's really cooking and they're not decimated by injuries everywhere. But I think that puts them into a real bind. And now all of a sudden, okay, Do you have to bring another safety up? And is Eli Apple on an island on this one? Is Cam Taylor-Britt on an island on this one? Is one of them against Stephon Diggs? Or are we putting Stephon Diggs into the slot? And so now you got to pay more attention to Stephon Diggs in general anyway. Anything that can put more emphasis onto the Bengals corners, I'm also a fan of. And I think the running game also helps that. And that's my next question for you. Thoughts on these Bengals corners is, we've talked about their defensive line, which is strong. I think their safety grouping is strong. And Jermaine Pratt was one of the best coverage linebackers in the league going into that first matchup between Bengals Bills. He had the lowest QB rating allowed when targeted of the 86 linebackers in the NFL, at least 20% of coverage snaps. And he also had the 11th lowest reception percentage at 72.2. I think he's good. I think Logan Wilson's good. Almost by default, the corners are the weakest group. But are they the weakest group of this defense because it's by default, or can they genuinely be picked on and taken advantage of?
Definitely the weakest group is the cornerback room. They're without Chidobe Awuzie, who's their unquestioned kind of top guy that they relied on in many ways. And Eli Apple has had a nice resurrection of his career in Lou Anarumo's defense, and feels like he's been able to be a nice player that is able to have some ball production, stay in phase a little bit. He's very scrappy. Cam Taylor-Britt was one of my Red Star guys in the draft. I think he's uber physical. I wasn't sure if he was someone that you end up seeing be a little tiny bit of a chess piece, or someone you just stick on one side and let go. So still needs some technical refinement. Is a big corner, is a strong corner, is someone that I would like to see get cleaner in kind of his transitions of his hips and his back pedals and things of that nature. But those guys, they really just are the epitome of the Bengals defense. Neither of them are an apex alpha, sigma athlete, dominant force. Really the only guy, the two things I know that Bengals defenders have as kind of a trump card is just DJ Reader's ability to shock and shed, and Trey Hendrickson trying to stick his face mask through your chest and go generate pressure. Trey Hendrickson's a very good pass rusher, but they're kind of a really good disciplined team defense. I think those corners do play into that quite a bit. The reason that DeMarcus Robinson double move happened was because almost Greg Roman is so bad at defaulting back to running all hitches or all stops that it was like, oh, they're running their stupid all hitches that they always run. Eli Apple's like, I'm going to pick this ball off. And DeMarcus Robinson's a slippery son of a gun and able to go get that little hitch and go going and trying to do that mirrored concept. So it was almost like the world's best tendency beater of the Ravens defaulting back into the dumbest thing they've ever done. I think that they are going to try and help those guys. I mean, Stephon Diggs is going to have to, I would imagine if I'm Leslie Frazier, I'm going to try and battle him at the line of scrimmage and have help over top a little bit a lot of the time, especially in known passing downs. I'm going to try and make sure that he can't get a clean release. I'm going to try and make sure that that corner feels like they're not going to let up a deep touchdown or something of the sort. So then we're going to end up seeing Ken Dorsey start trying to move him, start trying to shift him, start trying to put him as a number 2 or a number 3, some of those things, and continue through. So I do think the Bengals corners are disciplined. They just aren't technically refined enough in some of the more advanced kind of open field, like double posts, things like that. Trying to really run in space and no leverage deep. I think that the Bills can take advantage a little bit. So very disciplined defense, just they don't have that alpha. And I think it's a weird matchup because obviously, Diggs, I think Dawson Knox is really where you want to look. I think that if you can get the run game going a little bit and you can start to work a little bit of play action off of it, suddenly Dawson Knox, who I think does a good job bluffing and selling his blocks and then kind of leaking out and doing some of those things. I like that usage, especially towards the red area. He's coming off a strong week last week doing those exact things. And when he's playing confidently, it feels like he goes from like 6'4", 6'5" to 6'8". All of a sudden, he's able to go up and get the football, able to go make some big catches. So I'm looking to Dawson Knox as a player that needs to really go take advantage in some of those gaps. And if I'm the Bills, I'm kind of trying to replace Stephon Diggs' alignment with Dawson Knox's route. I think you can run Diggs away and have Knox go fill that area from an inside alignment and go make some hay.
That's a piece that I'm extremely intrigued to see in terms of how it shakes out in the passing game. Lou Anarumo is at this point, I think he's pretty well known for being almost Belichickian in his, like, he's going to take away whatever your best thing is. And people, like to see what game plan he's running because it kind of speaks to, based on what he creates or tailors for that week, it kind of gives you an insight into what the best thing is for the opponent, because that's what he wants to take away. He wants to, if your best thing is a left-handed hook, he's going to try and take away your left-handed hook and make you throw right-handed jabs all game. And we've seen so many teams, whether subtly or, overtly, try and take away Stephon Diggs. And he's one of those players that just has gravity. And it always seems like, at least in the playoffs, last year was Gabe Davis in the divisional round. And this past week, it was almost kind of everybody, because Josh Allen spread the ball around a ton. If they choose to take Stephon Diggs away, which is an if, maybe they choose to take away something else. Maybe it's just Josh Allen's legs from a scrambling perspective, and everything's about rush lane integrity, which the Bengals are also good at. They are, we've seen it against the Chiefs, whether it's with their 3-man rush or kind of their, muddled type of rush, their ability to condense or compress the pocket and get pressure, but not get out of their lanes and make themselves, be opened up to be vulnerable against quarterbacks who can move. Maybe that's the one thing. But I'm interested to see what Anarumo dubs as like, here's priority number 1 on the whiteboard. This is what we're taking away this week. And if it is Stephon Diggs, what does Ken Dorsey do to use him as that chess piece to pull coverages? And do we see, especially if they open up this game and they're using Stephon Diggs in the slot, like they did to a degree the first time they played Cincinnati, and Cincinnati has to give him that attention because, again, Stephon Diggs has gravity. The interior of the field opens up so much for your Dawson Knoxes, for Khalil Shakir, who has started to emerge a little bit. Maybe this is another Cole Beasley game. Maybe it's an Isaiah McKenzie game as he opens up. Maybe it's playoff Gabe Davis on the outside potentially, but what Anarumo chooses.
Playoff Gabe Davis won me a lot of money last week. I took him to have 100 yards.
Look at you. You're just nailing all these bets. Like, I like it. Yeah, playoff Gabe Davis is a real thing. Going back to a couple years ago, and then last season, and this year he had a good year with a tutty and over 100 yards again. What does Anarumo choose to take away? It is such, I think it's so obviously it's an important matchup piece, because then everything is a domino from there. Like, can he truly take it away? If he's trying to mitigate one of your strengths, how do you play to your other strengths? How do you mitigate your weaknesses? And that chess match battle that exists, really exciting. I'm glad you're in a similar state of mind when it comes to that. Spence, last question for you, and then we'll send you on your way. How do you think this game shakes out? Or no, because I don't want to lean into prediction territory, because I'm too superstitious and I don't want any of that. The biggest thing, the top overarching most important thing that will decide this game, besides who scores more points than the other team, it could be anything. It could be Bengals offense related, Bills offense, either team's defense. It could be special teams. It could be a coaching piece, an individual player piece, anything. It could be wide scale, granular, whatever. What do you think is top tier, number 1, S tier, when it comes to this thing will decide who wins this football game?
Being able to, for the Buffalo Bills to win, I think they have to convert in the red zone against a really disciplined Bengals defense.
Good call.
They stay in their assignment. You can beat them with being Stephon Diggs one-on-one, or, finding a soft spot, whatever it is, but they don't vacate their zones. They stay where they're supposed to. They reportedly have an incredibly detailed red zone presentation I've heard about 50 times. They know what their opponent likes to do in the red zone. They are good in the red zone. They've had some ups and downs a little bit, but I think that defense is so detailed. Their linebackers are really balanced. They feel comfortable in the A-gap. They feel like they can get pressure with Trey Hendrickson and kind of forcing Trey Hendrickson, the way he rushes, especially in the red zone, he rushes through without giving up contain. So it allows you to feel like, okay, we're going to be able to bottle a quarterback to the opposite side a little bit and start to gently move the entire defense that way. So the Ravens ran a play last week, for instance, where it was a PA boot right, and they had a 3-man tunnel screen for Mark Andrews with 3 offensive linemen.
Yes.
And 3 Bengals stayed on their side of the field and went and executed and tackled Mark Andrews. They end up, making a huge play. So it is tough to score on them down there. They chomp at the bit. They have really good gap assignment. The linebackers feel like they play well together. So I think the key to this game, one way or the other, is converting in the red zone. I think if the Bills go 3 for 3, for instance, then they end up easily having a W. If they go 1 for 4, 1 for 3, can't convert when Josh Allen is such a lethal threat. So I don't know if that's going to happen. I think arguably the top red zone threat in the NFL is Josh Allen and himself. So that is going to be kind of the battle that, if it tips one way or the other, I think decides this game.
I love the red zone piece. And again, we barely got through an entire, a half of the first quarter between Bengals Bills, but it already showed what happened. The Bengals got down and got high red zone or just slightly out, scored a touchdown, and the Bills got down within the 5 and they settled for 3, and it was 7-3. And that piece, again, it sounds like so simple, but if you get 3 when you could have gotten 7 and your opponent gets 7 instead of settling for 3, the maths just don't add up well for you on that side. And yeah, I love that you made the joke about the Bengals and their red zone package and all these pieces. But you look at what they are from a red zone defense perspective, and they're a quality group. They are top 10 in red zone DVOA. They are 8th. For reference, the Buffalo Bills are the number 1 red zone defense. So it's like, okay, 2 good red zone defenses going against one another. But then when you flip it to the 2 offenses in the red zone, it's stark differences. The Cincinnati Bengals are 5th in red zone DVOA on offense this year. The Buffalo Bills are 25th.
Wow.
It's gotten better.
I did not realize that.
Right? It's gotten better as the year went on. A lot of it is because of the poor start they had early on in the year. Josh Allen, turning the ball over in the red zone, and then some schematic and concept pieces that weren't ideal from Ken Dorsey. But yeah, for an offense that was number 2 in DVOA total for the offense, yeah, the Buffalo Bills are 25th in red zone DVOA this year.
I would lean strongly on James Cook and trying to get him the ball in the flat and trying to run some mesh a little bit, have a little rail route, things of that nature. I think they can attack the flat in the red zone, get the ball out quickly a couple times to help Josh Allen out. Might open things up for him down there.
Spence, you were a gem and a real treat, as I had hoped you would be, and I knew you would be, and I expected it. I know I kept you a little longer, so I apologize for that, but I think you had a good time, or at least I like to hope and believe.
Playoffs. It's playoff football. I'm here to talk ball. This is the best time of the year. We have Christmas directly into the playoffs. This is my adult Christmas now, is playoff football. So well happy to be here. Happy to talk ball all the time.
Just in case people don't know who you are, where they can find you, all that stuff. I say it on every episode. I always love, I just like directing people who watch the show to other people who know ball and know what's up, especially those who cover other teams. Because even if you're just a Bills fan, it's important to stay up on every other team, and you do a phenomenal job breaking down ball in general, but then also anything and everything to do with the Ravens. So tell people who you are, what you do, where they can find your work, what's your sign, if you like, long moonlit walks on the beach, whatever you want, the floor is yours.
I'm a big cheesesteak guy. I formerly worked for Sports Info Solutions, got published doing some NFL draft content with them. I'm really excited for upcoming NFL draft content. You can find me on Twitter at Ravens4Dummies. That's the number 4. You can find my work at BaltimoreBeatdown.com with SB Nation. And I'm always trying to post some draft content. I don't think I'm going to be headed to the Senior Bowl this year, but I'll still get the old login and be able to go through all the tape there and post some fun clips. So if you like draft content, I'm your guy. You can mute me or unfollow me afterwards if you're not a big Ravens guy. But I get into everything. I get into baseball. I get into all kinds of stuff on there. I get into life. So if you want to throw a follow in there, go for it. If not, I am not slighted at all. But I appreciate you guys. Hope the Bills come out with a win on this one. I think that they definitely could use it and definitely deserve it. And I think that the Bills Mafia deserves to see a winner there. So hopefully Bills come out strong. And hey, I like to think of it like this. I like to think in my little brain that whoever's fan base complains the least after they win playoff games gets gifted to the next round. And that is certainly not the Cincinnati Bengals. All they have done is bad word and moan for quite some time, dating back to a very unfortunate incident with Mr. DeMar Hamlin, who I hope is in good spirits. And it was really cool to see the Bills rally around them. But the Bengals continued moaning after that happened was pretty obnoxious. And I think that they've just continued to spiral. So I'll say go Bills. Hopefully they get it done and advance to the next round.
Yeah, sometimes you get back what you put out. And
I believe in the football gods, and I believe in football karma, and I think the Bills have done everything to deserve it. And I don't think that the Cincinnati Bengals have done much to deserve it.
It's a very real piece. I like how somebody came in right at the end. Jordan K came in and just said, "Sign Lamar." I'm all about it. Yeah, we'll see.
Nothing worse than a quarterback contract controversy. So in Baltimore Ravens land, that's what we're dealing with.
Not ideal, especially when the quarterback is his own agent, and it kind of complicates things even further. So we'll see what happens with Lamar. But I trust in you and your content, and I'm excited to see you over on the old Twitter and the interwebs as we go forward, exchanging draft content. I'm going to the Senior Bowl, so I will miss you not being there. But enjoy your week, your weekend. I'm sure I'll see you around the old Twitter DMs and Twitter in general. Again, I appreciate the absolute hell out of you for joining me. You crushed it as always. Godspeed, and I'll see you later.
Thank you so much, and go Bills.
Nice. Tremendous guest. We're going to keep rolling on this episode, so don't get it twisted and think like, oh, okay, cool, the episode's done, because it's not. It is not done. Huge thank you again to Mr. Spencer Schultz. Find him on Twitter at Ravens, the number 4 dummies, so Ravens 4 dummies. He is awesome. That's funny. Eric comes in and says, I love a little bilateral Bengals hate. Yeah, that's very fair. He's a guy who I don't even remember when I first started following him or if he followed me, but I just thought he was a guy who knew ball. And I was like, oh, cool. And then I realized he was a Ravens guy, and I had him on the show earlier in the year when Bills played the Ravens, and he was absolutely phenomenal. So I thought it was a really cool little twist. Instead of having somebody on who covers the team the Bills are going to play, having a little bit of, enemy of my enemy is my friend. So yeah, again, huge thank you to Spencer. I was appreciative of all you folks giving him kind words and flowers in the chat. So thank you very much. We're going to press on in this episode. What we're going to do on the back end of this episode now, we're going to dive into some Buffalo Bills game tape from this past week against the Miami Dolphins. I wanted to highlight several plays that highlighted, I wanted to detail several plays that highlighted several standout players in that game against the Miami Dolphins, but also tie that into a bit of what we're going to see in terms of how those players need to play this upcoming week against the Cincinnati Bengals and the importance of what we're going to see or what we saw against the Miami Dolphins in terms of execution. Yeah, Roy says a little more film. That's what we've been doing here. As the season has gone on here in Disguise Coverage, my thought is, you know what? I do the Cover One Film Room every Tuesday with Mr. Eric Turner. And I always thought, you know what? We cover specific pieces in the film room. I can cover other pieces here on Disguise Coverage and still dive into the film piece on the back end, kind of marry everything together on this show. So I appreciate you recognizing that, Roy. So yeah, we're going to dive into some film, highlighting some players and some concept pieces on the defensive side of the ball for the Buffalo Bills to just give some guys their flowers, some recognition, but also tie it into some things that we're going to see or may potentially see, and from an important standpoint coming up against the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend for the Buffalo Bills. Real quick, I want to throw out some love to the sponsor. You folks know the drill. One Pie Pizza. It is in, I got close this time. I give up doing this. It's in the upper right-hand corner. You see the One Pie Pizza logo. The logo is fantastic. They also have a buffalo outside in front of the restaurant, and it's painted all Zubaz style. It's absolutely phenomenal. The only thing better than that are the people who run One Pie. They're tremendously generous. They do tons of initiatives and drives for the community. I mentioned them a bunch on here. I plugged, Toys for Tots that they did come holiday time, what they do with the Alzheimer's Foundation, what they do in partnering with Roswell to try and knock out cancer, the SPCA. They're tremendous, great people, and they make great food. The best pizza, hands down, in Buffalo, New York. Fantastic cheese to sauce ratio, delicious sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni. They make their own homemade blue cheese. It is phenomenal. And they have a ton of specialty pies too. They're honestly the best. I'm so thankful and proud of the partnership that I have with them every single day, because the food is absolutely the best. And the only thing better than that is the quality of people that they are. So go get yourself some One Pie. Find in the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go get some if you live in the Buffalo area. Also, as we start to transition now, if you are here and enjoying this episode, we got a lot of live viewers, and I know it's corny to ask for it. I know it's corny to say that. I know it's corny to say that I say that every single week, but while you're here, please drop a like on this video if you would be so kind. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. They go a long way towards helping myself and the entire Cover One team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Help the algorithm, help the channel, help myself if you would be so kind and drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live now or watching later, post live, whatever floats your boat. Please drop a like. It's greatly appreciated. Now, let's dive into some tape. So this first play here, we're going to highlight a play from Mr. Tremaine Edmonds. This play I broke down on Twitter, and I wanted to lead with this one because I knew it was going to tie into what Spencer was going to say. Not, again, I don't share notes with the guests. I try to keep it organic. I don't want to know what they're going to say. I don't want them to know what I'm going to say, and I'm not trying to telegraph anything. But my thought was Spence would talk about, the size advantage of Tremaine Edmonds and the athleticism, the linebacker play, especially in juxtaposition with the Ravens linebackers. Like, I think Roquan Smith is phenomenal, but he is on the smaller side of things. So you have somebody with the size coupled with the athleticism in Tremaine Edmonds. You've got somebody with a pterodactyl wingspan who is fast and is athletic. It changes ankles. It changes how open passing windows and lanes are on the interior. And this play encapsulates all of that. Tremaine Edmonds' size, his range, his intelligence, his processing. There was a multitude of good plays in this game against the Dolphins, but this one is arguably my favorite out of the entire game, offense or defense. Also, I love John championing, trying to, the whole drop more likes on this video movement. So please, 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 and thank you. John says we have 16 more likes to get to 100. That would be awesome if we could push that over the 100 number mark. So that would be absolutely fantastic. Appreciate you, John. All right, let's dive into this. So his first play, you see Tremaine Edmonds, Mr. Edmonds. Let me change my little cursor here. You see Edmonds right in the center of the field. And this is basically going to be a Tampa 2 coverage from the Buffalo Bills. You're going to see Trey White come up. You're going to see Elam come up, but they're basically going to sit in the flats right here. And you're going to see Tremaine Edmonds come screaming back in the middle of the field. This is that Tampa 2. For anybody who's familiar with it, this is in relation to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or especially the Chicago Bears, where Brian Urlacher was that guy almost in the deep third, like playing like a deep third safety at times in this cover 2 look. Again, this is all based on regular cover 2. You would just have your linebackers here, but then you have that vulnerability in the center. So teams would attack that left and right. So what the Tampa 2 started to do was kind of slow play that middle and then also kind of, hit that deep third with it. But you need an athletic, rangy linebacker. And as Jordan says, same class. Yes, Roquan was taken earlier than Tremaine. I think Roquan was like a top 10 pick. He went, and then Edmonds was taken towards the back end of the teens when the Bills traded up. Good call. So let's look at this play from Tremaine Edmonds. Again, here he is, right in the center of your screen. I'm going to go back from the snap. Watch him on the ball. He drops. He turns and he looks to the inside slot receiver up top, right? He's watching. He's carrying. This is such a huge piece and it gets lost. Watch the fluidity in the hips as he opens to one side and opens to another. That may seem small. That level of athleticism and fluidity at that size is ridiculous. It's unicorn-like. But he drops back. He eyes the slot to the top, sees what's developing, knows that Terran's there. So he turns his eyes, or he turns his head, gets his eyes on the QB. He's watching Skylar Thompson, and then he eyes Mike Gesicki, picks him up, carries him downfield, takes an angle, and I know it's hard to see on this. He gets a piece on this ball. And on the live version, it looks like, Gesicki dropped it. Edmonds gets a finger on it, and it changes the trajectory of this pass. Let's watch from the end zone angle from Mr. Tremaine Edmonds. Skylar Thompson is faking the snap. Boom, there you go. Drops, takes the angle. He's eyeing that top side slot. Nothing. Again, now he turns. He's eyeballing Skylar Thompson. So he's reading Skylar Thompson. He also knows, obviously, the coverage that they're playing and where Taron Johnson is in relation to him. So he knows he can start to play to this left side a little bit, which is why he opens up his hips. But notice how he maintains that straight line. When he turns his hips, he turns the hips in a minute. He doesn't start drifting or getting off path. He maintains that straight line. That is straight practice technique that you practice all day. You will be on like the 25-yard line, and your defensive back coach or your linebackers coach will tell you to open and flip hips, and you're just trying to flip and stay on that line. They don't want you to drift. They don't want you to waste steps. You're trying to stay streamlined right on that line. Watch as he drops. Straight drop, but then he's reading Skylar Thompson. He sees where his eyes are going. So where does his eyes go? His eyes go inside, and he sees Mike Gesicki, and he picks him up. Then he peeks back at Skylar Thompson, sees the ball coming, and this is where the size and the length come in, right? So you get the mental side, you get the processing, you get the athleticism that allows him to get back there, and then here comes the size and athleticism, and he just tips it past Gesicki. Again, in real time, you're sitting there thinking, oh, well, he dropped this pass. Not true. Edmonds gets the slightest finger on it, changes the trajectory of the ball. Oh, this play is not normal or easy. I think, and I don't even know if Fred Warner finishes it because he doesn't have the length and the size that Edmonds does, but this play can maybe be made by like 3 or 4 more linebackers, tops, literally tops. And one of them is Fred Warner. Like, Warner is a monster in the middle of the field for that Niners defense. But just look at the athletic pterodactyl in the middle of the field. Just that hip turn. I'm gonna keep rolling in fast motion. Look at the hip turn. Drop, eyeball, flip, eyeball, diagnose, drop, boom. Absolutely tremendous from Tremaine Edmonds. And again, like Spence talked about, the Bengals are going to try and attack that middle of the field, right? If they're putting Jamar Chase in the middle of the field, if they're putting, Hayden Hurst in those explosive opportunities to take advantage of the middle of the field, like we saw against the Bills early on in that game against the Bengals, but like we saw multiple times against the Baltimore Ravens, Edmonds is coverage sound responsibility in the interior is going to be tremendously important, whether it's, carrying guys downfield or matching and picking up the number 3 or potentially number 2 receiver coming in the middle of the field. His processing is going to be so important. So I wanted to highlight this because it was a tremendous play from him, but also this is going to be of the utmost importance for the Buffalo Bills against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are going to try and work that interior of the field. And when you have a quarterback who doesn't have the strongest arm like Joe Burrow, he's a phenomenal quarterback, but he doesn't have the strongest arm. If you can tighten those windows and shrink those passing windows with your athleticism or your size or your speed, it makes life more difficult. Yeah, and as Eric says, wow, nice play. Phenomenal play from Tremaine Edmonds. Truly very, very, very good. Let's go to another one now. We're going to go to this Taron Johnson play. I'm going to work through here. There's Taron Johnson right here in the slot. This is the punch on Jalen Waddle when he punches this ball out of Waddle's hands. So you're going to see man coverage up top from the Bills, zone. It looks like to the bottom they're playing a bit of their combo coverage here. Potentially could be man to the bottom if you're thinking, okay, Trey is manning up on the running back coming out of the backfield, but in essence, he's sitting back dropping, so it's functioning like zone at the bottom. They're running man up top. Here's Taron in trail against Jalen Waddle, who is so fast. Waddle's got the step on him, right? Bit underthrown. Here's Waddle high pointing the ball right here. Watch Taron punch right through when Waddle brings those hands down. Tremendous timing, tremendous hand-eye coordination. We're going to show it from the end zone angle. I wanted to highlight this because plays at the catch point have been something that have plagued the Bills defense seemingly since they came out of the bye week. We've seen it from everyone. We've seen Taron have bad luck, Dane Jackson, Kyrie Elam, Trey White, a multitude of their players, not in this game against the Dolphins. We saw double-digit pass breakups from this team. We saw Tremaine Edmonds with several. We saw Taron Johnson with one here. We're going to show you one of Tre'Davious White. We saw one from Kyrie Elam. We're seeing pass breakups left and right. The Bills defense making plays on the ball was tremendously important in this game against Miami. It's going to be of the utmost importance again against the Cincinnati Bengals. You are going up against legitimate ball winners in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and even Tyler Boyd, even Hayden Hurst, guys who either have size or speed or athleticism or all of those things together in one package. So making plays at the catch point and on the ball is going to be of the utmost importance. Waddle gets behind Taron here. Now watch, he has to go up. He elevates, right? Fine play right here from Waddle. High points the football. Johnson knows he's beat. Waddle brings this ball down, and that's when Johnson, bang, punches it out. He waits for him to bring this ball down after he high points it. This is exactly what Jalen Waddle, what you're taught to do. You go up, you high point the football. Don't let the ball come to you in traffic. You go up, you take it out of the air. Jalen Waddle does that. But as he brings it down, Taron knows, like, okay, he's going to bring this ball down. Let me time it and punch right through his hands as he tries to secure this catch. And he punches that right out. Absolutely beautiful, brilliant play from Taron Johnson. I'm going to run it in real time one more time so you can see this piece. Catch, and you can see his hands come down, and it gets punched right out. Go to the end zone angle again, one more time. I just love this play. I just want to play it one more time and be able to see it. High point the football from Waddle, bang, punch out. The timing and the technique and the awareness that you have to have on that play, stunning from Taron Johnson. Now, let's go to another stunning pass breakup. Mr. Tre'Davious White, again on Jalen Waddle. Funny how that works. So here's Trey up at the top. This is another one. Waddle gets behind him, which I don't even think is negative for Taron or Trey or really anybody. The Dolphins' speed at wide receiver is, I don't even need to talk about it. Like, we know it's unreal. Tyreek Hill is probably the fastest player in the NFL. And Jalen Waddle is probably, at worst, top 10. Also, maybe top 5. Like, they both can fly. They both can cook. Waddle gets behind Trey White here. But watch the recovery speed. That's a huge piece, right? We're going to start with the recovery speed first. watch in slow-mo. You think here, granted, Skylar Thompson underthrows this ball a little bit, which is fair. But we've been talking about Tre'Davious White's health. And granted, his knee is going to come into play more with stop-start technique. But look at him close the gap, chase this down, and then the punch out at the end. Again, we're going to focus on the punch out in a minute, but just focus on how Waddle gets by him. Trey White gets on his giddy up, runs this down, makes a play on the ball. Now, let's watch the play on the ball piece, right? So Trey is watching Jalen Waddle, waiting for him to make a play on this ball. Jalen tries. He gets somewhat close to kind of late handsing this, and this is why you try to catch the ball with late hands. So if the defender is watching you watch the ball, when you go to reach for the ball, they're going to reach out and try and punch through your hands or break up that pass in some way. So if you don't reach out until the very last minute and, use late hands, the defender has less of an opportunity to kind of see what you're going to do. You don't telegraph your move as much, right? But Waddle reaches there, and the timing is unreal from Tre'Davious White. Again, we'll look at it from the sideline angle. Right as he goes up for it, you see Trey start to reach. You can see his lower body because he's reaching and already trying to punch through. That is simultaneous. The ball doesn't even get into Waddle. On the previous play with Taron Johnson, Waddle had it and brought it down, and Taron punched through. That doesn't even the opportunity doesn't even exist for that one here because White times it perfectly. You can see the ball right here on the outside. It's not in his hands. It's functionally out. Another amazing play at the catch point. Also really good recovery speed, like I mentioned, but just unreal timing. Unreal timing from Tre'Davious White to have that piece. Oh, I got to stop. I saw a super chat. Oh, this is awesome. John, you've been awesome and super supportive all night with really good comments, questions, trying to get everybody to drop more likes. So I just appreciate you in general. But thank you so much for the super chat and the donation. And John also says, great content and superb chat to hit that 100 likes. Keep it going. That's awesome, folks. I really appreciate the hell out of everybody for dropping 100 likes. Let's, ride this thing until the wheels fall off. More likes, more, insatiable. There's never enough likes. But sincerely, thank you very much for the 100 so far. Let's keep pushing forward. And thank you very much for the super chat, John, and the very kind words. Yeah, watch. We'll finish this play here and start to move on to our next. Unreal timing from Trey to punch that ball out. And you're going to need that. Joe Burrow is going to give his receivers opportunities to win. And honestly, it works out more often than not for him. When you've got T. Higgins and you've got Jamar Chase and you've got Tyler Boyd, and again, even Hayden Hurst, like you throw the ball up, those dudes have the ability to take 50-50 balls and make it like 60-40, 70-30 balls, which is ridiculous. No matter where they are, they give you an opportunity to have a pretty successful shot at winning the ball. Huge piece. Huge piece. This one, next play. I talked about it earlier in this episode. The Bills pass rush from the front four perspective, I know it was somewhat lacking. I know people were concerned a bit. I know there's some more confidence potentially in the pass rush going into this game. Biggie Scooby comes in and says the Bengals' depleted O-line will break down and Burrow will get sacked 9+ times. That would be, wow. That would be absolutely tremendous. Arcadius comes in and says the front four are going to have to get at Burrow. Absolutely. We talked about it earlier in this episode, the importance of the Bills being able to have numbers and coverage, and they're only going to be able to do that if they can get pressure with the front four and also fit the run with the front four in their light boxes. But I digress. I know fans were left a bit wanting in terms of just production from the front four without blitzes or without simulateds or creepers in that game against Miami. But the front four, like I mentioned earlier, were dominant against the run. And I wanted to highlight this play from Shaq Lawson here. See him on the edge at the top. I have him highlighted again. There's Shaq, the top edge right there. Watch him basically shut down this run all by himself. Gets into Taron Armstead, shuts down the run. Now, the Dolphins sideline is pissed, and rightfully so, because I'll show you here. Ahmed should have taken this outside. Like, follow your fullback. Here's your fullback right here, Mr. Alec Ingold. Follow your fullback. Go to the outside. But Shaq does enough in getting into Taron Armstead. So Taron Armstead is trying to reach Shaq and either push him the hell out or get him, reach him, and seal him. So that way it's just a clear and nice, easy convoy going around the edge. Shaq doesn't allow that to happen because of the play that he makes here. He steps inside, but he gets right into Armstead, and then he starts driving, and he moves towards it. He reads the path of the ball carrier and the path of the ball. He understands the toss action and what's happened on the outside. So he doesn't even get his helmet to the outside. He gets like half of his entire body to the outside, which is what influences Ahmed to be like, you know what? Let me have to cut it back. Then he cuts it back, and Shaq completely sheds Terran Armstead and makes this play. This is literally like a one-man gang stopping a run all by himself. And yes, I know Terran Armstead is banged up, and Ahmed should have taken this ball outside, but that's a really good run defense rep from Shaq Lawson, making it hard on Ahmed. Again, we'll look at it from a sideline angle. You can see the space that's there on the outside. He should have taken it. And then you have a pretty advantageous look. You got Ingold coming up and fitting on Poyer. Who knows what happens there? Ahmed definitely, again, should have taken this outside, but Shaq muddied this read. You can see the hesitation in Ahmed's feet and decision-making because he's like, okay, let me cut this inside. And he cuts right into Shaq because Shaq sheds his man. That type of ownership was seen rep after rep. We saw from Shaq, Daquan Jones, Groot, AJ Epinesa had a couple of good run defense reps. Ilianku had a couple good ones. Tim Settle had a bunch of good ones. Basham even had a couple. Like the whole defensive line was really sound and physical and violent against the run in this game. And it was a huge bonus as they forced Miami to really put everything onto Skylar Thompson. We're going to look at another run defense rep now for the Buffalo Bills. Oh, good comment here from John. John saying Shaq is deserving of a contract. We would be in trouble without him. He's basically become the de facto starter since Vaughn went down. He's seen an uptick in snaps, and he's that guy, especially on early downs, that they lean into. But you're seeing him in pass rush situations as well. But yeah, he's been absolutely tremendous. They've had to lean on him once Von Miller went down. He's been a calming presence. He's physical. He's violent. He brings a bit of bite and swagger to this defense. Really tremendously encouraging performance we've seen from Shaq, and we'll see what happens with him going forward. I want to bring up this comment from Jordan. He says, those stomps on the sideline. Yeah, that's in reference to, actually, let's go back and look at it and just see, kind of how funny it is. Watch how mad the Dolphins sideline is. Here we go. Take it outside. Oh, no, go inside. They're all just mad. That's when you first I remember seeing it on the, during the game as well. And I was like, ooh, and I want to see this on the game tape. Again, I give credit to Shaq for forcing that play to happen there. But yeah, Ahmed should have taken that outside. But nonetheless, here's a good play again, run defense-wise. This one, there's a little bit of trickeration. This is a reverse to Tyreek Hill. I have 3 players highlighted for their performance on this play. Daquan Jones in the center here. Shaq Lawson up at the edge again. And then Mr. Tremaine Edmonds second here, or at the second level in the off-ball linebacker position. So watch Shaq up here and Daquan Jones, how effective they are at making Tyreek Hill widen on this rep. Shaq reads it the whole way and he stays home. Daquan Jones just gets real good penetration and gets so far upfield. Tyreek Hill has to widen around both of them, and they basically effectively drive him to the sideline. And then we're going to see Tremaine Edmonds absolutely fly to this ball. So see the first piece on the jet. There is a ton of space for Tyreek Hill. And it's all negated because Shaq stayed home and Daquan Jones is getting upfield. So going slow-mo, that's Daquan Jones right here. Look at him get upfield to the point that Hill has to widen. He has to take a huge wide arc. Shaq is giving him problems too, forces him to the sideline, and then there's Tremaine Edmonds. I want you folks to watch Tremaine Edmonds again. Right here, he's the man circled. Watch the speed. The sideline-to-sideline speed from Tremaine Edmonds. He's booking it. He's cutting this thing off. Again, help defense from Shaq and Daquan. Really good athleticism from Tremaine Edmonds. A nice team defense piece against an opportunity to create a genuinely and legitimate explosive play, and it gets shut down because of sound technique, because Shaq stayed home, Daquan stayed home, and then you get really good range and read and processing from Tremaine Edmonds to cut this thing down. Good rep. One more time from the sideline angle, or from the end zone angle, I should say. Watch Shaq on the edge here. Come off. And he's like, wait a minute, something's not right. Look at him. He's eyes in the backfield. He's got a good base. He's literally reading this play out, seeing what's going on. He's got that responsibility. If somebody comes back around on that side, that's his man. That's his responsibility. So he's doing his job. And then you've got Daquan just screaming upfield. Also, you get a bad block on the outside from Jeff Wilson. He doesn't really do anything to affect Shaq. He could have pushed him inside a little bit more. And then Tremaine flows over the top, Marlowe over the top as well. Good help defense again. What the Bills do in coverage is tied to how they play the run with their linebackers, with their front. So being able to see those pieces is hugely important for this upcoming matchup. And again, wanted to give some flowers along the way. Next play for the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to highlight Greg Rousseau and Matt Milano here. So you're going to get a creeper pressure here from the Buffalo Bills. Now, I use these phrases all the time. I think I've explained it a bunch, but just in case I haven't, because we're going to dive into two of them right now. And I do think it'll be important for this upcoming game as it was against Miami. Simulated and creeper pressures. So the only difference between a simulated pressure and a creeper pressure is that a simulated pressure shows pressure pre-snap. Now, so that's the difference between a simulated and a creeper, right? Simulated pressure shows pressure pre-snap. And what a simulated pressure is, it's a safe pressure. It gives the look and feel of a blitz, but it's not a blitz. A simulated pressure is a four-man rush that brings a linebacker or a defensive back on a rush in exchange for dropping a defensive lineman into coverage. So you could bring a linebacker and drop an edge. You could bring two linebackers, drop your two defensive tackles, any combination you want. Just as long as you're basically dropping any traditional defensive lineman for every one linebacker or defensive back that's rushing. And again, you're still just rushing four. So this means as a defense, you can use a simulated pressure or a creeper pressure. Again, a creeper is the same as a simulated, except you're not showing it pre-snap. You can use these and still be able to drop 7 into coverage to defend the pass, which is huge in today's NFL because it's minimal risk, minimal cost. Some of the benefits of them, you can create the illusion of a blitz with just a four-man rush. You don't have to sell out in order to get to the quarterback. You can play multiple coverage schemes behind them because you still have 7 dropping into coverage. And you also have the potential to dictate the kind of pressure, the kind of protection you're going to be getting from the offense, because the offense has to set its protections. Who's responsible for blocking who? Are they using a full slide, a half slide? Are they going 5-0? Are they manning up? And when you show pressure, each person that's showing pressure has to be accounted for by the offense. So depending on how many you show or what kind of look you show, you can force an offense to be like, we have to keep a running back in. We have to keep a tight end in order to handle all this pressure. And then you drop out and you only bring 4. At the worst for your defense, you just made them keep in an extra body that now is not out into the route distribution. So now you have the potential to have even further numbers advantage into coverage. So you have the opportunity there, in addition to just causing havoc in terms of them figuring out who to pick up, who's actually rushing, who's dropping into coverage, how was our protection plan pre-snap, how is it compromised now post-snap. A lot of benefits, and all the benefits basically of a blitz or a pressure for a defense, with the added benefit of still being able to drop 7 defenders in the coverage. The downside is, of course, you are dropping non-coverage players into coverage. So you are taking a defensive end or an edge or a defensive tackle and dropping them into coverage, and they have to function and live in that space, which can be potentially negative. So that's simulated pressures and creepers. Again, that apply. Everything I just said applies to both. The only difference between a simulated and a creeper is that a creeper pressure doesn't show pressure pre-snap, and a simulated pressure does. So on this snap here, what we have from Mr. Matt Milano, we have a creeper pressure from the Buffalo Bills. So if you're looking, you've got your 4-down lineman, and you've got Matt Milano here in an off-ball position. Matt Milano is not showing pressure. He's lined up in an off-ball spot. Could be lined up right over the slot receiver. Maybe he's covering him. Maybe he's going to drop to the flat. Maybe he's going to drop into the hook curls. Maybe this is quarters. Maybe it's cover 2. Maybe it ends up being cover 3. There's a multitude of possibilities you can get. Watch what happens on the snap. So I've got Rousseau and Milano highlighted for a reason, because on the snap, Greg Rousseau, I'm going to go in slow motion, is going to drop off, and Matt Milano is going to be the one to rush. So before we get to the good part of it, so watch this tackle right here, Mr. Hunt, normally a right guard, put into right tackle in this position. On this play, watch him. He drops back, expecting to pass protect. He steps out. You literally see him take a 45-degree set and be like, okay, I'm blocking Greg Rousseau. Here I go. And he has nobody. You have now wasted this person. He is picking up no one. And the bonus is now you're dropping. So you're dropping Greg Rousseau into coverage to potentially take away a hot or an underneath route. But at the very least, you've wasted an offensive lineman in the protection, right? So if you look at the rest of the protection grouping here, The Dolphins are just blocking with their offensive line. So because they've wasted an offensive lineman, they now only have 4 blockers to deal with 1, 2, 3, 4 rushers for the Buffalo Bills. So now you've got nothing but one-on-one opportunities. Hunt is going to come back inside and try and help out, but all he can do is help out the right guard here. And with the rush pattern from the Bills on the other side, they have nothing but one-on-one opportunities on the other side. Matt Milano gets in the backfield, and he sacks Skylar Thompson. Let's look at it from this angle. Again, just the 5-man protection from the Dolphins. Going to get the motion from Ahmed and get the snap. Boom. Hunt kicks out. Again, he's expecting to take Rousseau. Rousseau doesn't rush, right? So now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Dolphins blockers for 1, 2, 3, 4 Bills rushers. Again, Hunt squeezes down to help out his right guard. So he'll help on Ilianku. But again, that still means one-on-one, one-on-one, one-on-one. And then you hope somebody can win. And the person who wins in this regard is Matt Milano. He's up against a practice squad guard who was called up for this game. Watch the move here from Matt Milano. Watch the burst. Watch the athleticism. Just steps inside. Quick, almost like a jump cut, like a running back. Gets inside, then has the strength to bring down, fight through, brings down Skylar Thompson for the sack. Again, let's watch it from a simulated pressure, creeper pressure perspective. Rousseau on the line, drops out. Milano comes. So again, this functioned like a blitz, right? You had a pressure generated from confusion and causing miscommunication up front, but you're still only rushing 4. So the Bills still have 7 into coverage. Rousseau doesn't do too bad here, especially when you're that big and tall and have the wingspan that he does. You can just kind of exist and live there and be a deterrent just because of how big you are. But the Bills were able to dictate protection here. They wasted Miami's right tackle, created one-on-ones on the other side, and got a sack. Again, this is what they had to do in this game to generate pressure because the front 4 wasn't getting it done consistently. I was down on the front 4 from a pass rush perspective when the Bills-Dolphins game ended. When I went back and watched the tape, I felt a bit better, but I still don't feel holistically confident going into this game. I think the Bills are going to have to use simulated pressures and creeper pressures in order to generate pass rush or consistent pass rush or pressure on Joe Burrow. Again, I'll play it one more time so you folks can see it. Watch Rousseau drop out. Milano goes. Fantastic. Baltimore did this a lot this past week. In addition to, using 3-man rushes, they really did a good job disguising things and confusing the Bengals offensive line. Again, what's also a nice piece with this one, you have to force the offensive line to communicate. You have to force them to adjust and make plays. And when you've got a bunch of backup offensive linemen, maybe the chemistry isn't there, maybe the talent level isn't there, maybe the awareness isn't there. You're putting more onto their plate and you're taxing them more mentally and physically. And that's a good thing when you're taxing your opponent. Let's go to another clip here. This play. This one is going to be a Tremaine Edmonds pressure. I'm going to show it from the end zone angle because it shows better. Again, simulated pressures, creeper pressures. You're dropping a traditional defensive lineman. You're bringing a non-traditional rusher like you're going to get on this play. Again, this one is a creeper. Why? AJ Epinesa is going to drop out. He's not going that far. I just, exaggerate a little bit on the stick. He's going to drop out, and Tremaine Edmonds is going to come through. So because Edmonds is not showing pressure pre-snap, that's a creeper. If Edmonds was lined up right here in one of the gaps and he came and Epinesa dropped out, then it would be a simulated pressure. You hear people talk about simulated pressures all the time. Like I heard it a ton during the national championship game between Georgia and TCU. And when it was being talked about, they weren't actually running simulated pressures. So that's a conversation for another time, but I digress. Watch Mr. AJ Epinesa drop. Mr. Tremaine Edmonds is going to blitz. Again, we get more pressure. Armstead stepped out. Epinesa doesn't come. So, okay, they focus on that side. Edmonds comes scot-free up the middle. Flushes Skylar Thompson. Jones takes a good angle. Boom. Let's watch it from this angle, or maybe Basham took the angle. So again, I got Epinesa highlighted on the right. He's going to drop out. Edmonds is going to blitz. We'll watch it in slow-mo. You get the motion from Jeff Wilson. Edmonds is yet to declare. So This poor right guard. He's trying to diagnose what he's seeing. Armstead sees that Epenesa's out, so he's like, okay, cool. Let me help down on Ed Oliver. But Edmonds is blitzed because, again, it's coming from the second level and it wasn't shown pre-snap. The guard doesn't know that he's rushing. And Edmonds is so fast and bursty that he gets through the line before that guard can even make a play. Again, we'll watch from the sideline angle. He looks. Watch this guard right here again. Right here. Watch his head as he's trying to survey everything that's going on. He comes out. He looks. He stares at Edmonds. He looks at Basham. And then he comes back to Edmonds. But again, Edmonds is so fast and athletic and has long strides. He just gets there too fast. Let's watch it in real time. Bang. So fast coming from the second level. He's already through. And then he's got the ability, right, to retrace. Edmonds gets through and he doesn't get Thompson, but watch his ability to just stop. Like, okay, let me get back on track and go right after him. Bills take a good angle. Also, Bills do a good job in coverage here. Watch them clamp down on everything. Watch Taron Johnson see that Thompson is going to escape. Just comes forward, clamps down. Good coverage on the back end. Nowhere to go. But again, another creeper pressure. AJ Epinesa drops. Tremaine Edmonds blitzes. He's not showing a pre-snap. You can actually even see Milano and Edmonds communicating with each other right here. Edmonds is almost pointing to himself a little bit, saying, I'm going. Milano takes a spot. That's also the piece too, right? Milano takes Edmonds a spot, and Epinesa drops to where Milano was. So again, you have a similar coverage pattern to what you would have had if you just brought the 4 down defensive linemen and left Milano and Edmonds. But it's a nice little changeup, nice little game. You keep the offensive linemen on their toes. If they don't make the right read, if they don't have the right call pre-snap, if they don't have the right communication, if they don't have the right execution, you create a free runner, or you create a one-on-one opportunity and hope your guy can win. Or in this case, again, you created a free runner right down the pipe, right as Skylar Thompson flushes them from the pocket. On the previous one we showed, it created a one-on-one that Matt Milano was able to win. So again, like I mentioned, a lot of potential advantages in the toolbox for the Buffalo Bills in this game. Wanted to highlight those pieces again because, this Bills team did some really good things against the Miami Dolphins. It is on both sides of the ball, but, their defense did some really good things. As RJ says, AJ wasn't bad in coverage there. He's actually not bad in coverage when he drops on these looks. Him, Basham, and Rousseau are sufficient. They're not like, you don't want them dropping all the time to the point where you're like, they should drop more. But they're sufficient. They're not just completely lost. They're not horribly unathletic. So yeah, AJ Epinesa did well on some of these reps, and he has throughout the year. We're going to see what the Bills can do in that piece. Like I mentioned in talking with Spence earlier and mentioned it throughout this episode, I think it's an important piece every week. But against an offense like the Cincinnati Bengals, you need to get pressure with your front 4 or your front 3 if you can do it. I mentioned those numbers for Joe Burrow against 3-man rushes and how much he struggled. I would like to see the Bills lean into that a little bit. I would like to see them run games up front, twists and stunts with their 4-man rush grouping. Maybe throw some simulateds and some creepers in there just to see what you can get. But in an ideal world, the Bills can just rush 4 and they can play all the coverage games they want on the back end. Running these simulateds and these creepers and these blitzes and, these different types of games, they can work, but there is inherent risk to them. If you get caught with the wrong play or the QB diagnoses it, you can really be left vulnerable. So there is a risk reward nature to it. So the safest option for the Buffalo Bills is to be able to get pressure with the front 4 and just roll through all their coverages on the back end, whether they're playing 2 high looks, single high, they're going single high shells, 2 high shells pre-snap, spinning down, dropping back, vacating, anything and everything. We need to see the front 4 get pressure. Cincinnati's offensive line, again, they're banged up, and on the interior, they're a bit clunky. They're more heavy-handed and, physical and powerful than they are athletic and speedy or rangy. This could be a game where Ed Oliver's speed and athleticism and quickness and get off proves to be a very advantageous piece for him. That could be set across the entire defensive line for the Bills. So it's a huge matchup piece. I've mentioned it a whole bunch. There's a multitude of matchups in this game, but that's one I'm really hanging my hat on both sides. The trench battle is going to continue to be the important battle for me almost every single week, depending on who the Bills are facing, but really is what I anticipate these playoffs looking like. Can the Bills on the offensive side of the ball protect Josh Allen? How do they hold up against Hill and Reeder and Hendrickson and Hubbard and Osai? How do they hold up against the run? How much push Can they reestablish the line of scrimmage? How much work does Josh Allen have to go through mentally and physically to avoid the rush and deal with pressure and make plays downfield? That's on the offensive side of the ball. And then the same on the defensive side for the Bengals offensive line versus the Buffalo Bills. Can the Bills get at Joe Burrow? Can they get through that offensive line? Can they make Burrow uncomfortable? He's more mobile than he gets credit for, but he's not, a huge scrambler or a huge runner. He's very elusive in the pocket. He's good at evading. He's good at manipulating the pocket. Like Spence said, he's good at, maneuvering and getting those shoulders square and his base back and making throws downfield. So you got to get after him. The battle in the trenches, and again, you can say this for almost every week, but this week especially so important given the opponent, and even more important because it's the playoffs. It's win or go home. So I hope you folks saw that in the, themes of this episode, having Spence on earlier, and then some of the tape pieces we went on and into here on the back end. And that'll do it for us here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I want to thank, again, Mr. Spencer Schultz for joining me with this little bit of enemy of my enemy is my friend nature to this episode. He was absolutely phenomenal. Give him a follow on Twitter if you're on there at Ravens4Dummies. Huge thank you to him for being on this show. Huge thank you to all you folks for joining me live on this episode. Thank you very much for being here, your presence, the back and forth with one another, the back and forth with me and Spence, the super chat donation from you, John, the kind words from everyone, the likes that were dropped. Sincerely, very, very, very much appreciated. Thank you folks so much. If you're not watching live and you're watching later, thank you very much for your post-live view. Please drop a like on this video if you would be so kind as well. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's very cool as well. Please rate and review Disguise Coverage on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave a comment as well. That's also tremendously helpful. Again, whether you're here on YouTube or anywhere, rate, review, subscribe to Disguise Coverage, to the Cover One channel. Please and thank you. It goes a sincerely long way. Really appreciate you folks. Oh, John says there's 118 likes, and that's really good. I hope we can get even more. But John, you were the champion for this like movement, so I really sincerely appreciate you. I hope you keep coming back every single week to allow me to keep racking up these likes, keep pushing that. I appreciate the hell out of you for it, sincerely. I hope you, John, and everyone here, hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another in general. Also, if you're going to the game this weekend, be safe. Look out for any tomfoolery or shenanigans. Try not to cause too much tomfoolery or shenanigans yourself. It's going to be a wild atmosphere as the Bengals come into town. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Be safe out there at the game. Be safe in general. Take care of one another. Be kind. Big week this week. Divisional round against a very good football team with a little bit of a budding rivalry on the cusp. We'll see what happens. I will see you next week for another episode of Disguise Coverage. I love Titan coming through and saying smash the like. Yes, Titan. Smash that like. I appreciate you folks. I will see you next week. Hopefully for, I'm not even going to say that. I will see you next week for another episode of Disguise Coverage. With that being said, I am Anthony Prohaska. Thank you very much for your support in whatever way, shape, and form it comes. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.